You have to live up to another person's expectations to prove your worth. Sadly, this can all lead to neglecting oneself, to sabotaging oneself. Hi, this is Jim Breon. Welcome to this YouTube channel where we discuss all things mental health. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed professional clinical counselor in Orange County, California. What I'm going to be talking about today are traumatic bonds, and sometimes referred to as trauma bonds. How they happen. We hear the topic of trauma bonds or traumatic bonds often when people are kind of stuck in dysfunctional, unhealthy relationships that they can't seem to get out of. Or maybe people repeat certain relationship patterns over and over and over again. Dysfunctional relationship patterns where there's abuse, manipulation, and people can't seem to break out of it. In fact, many times there's also domestic violence in these types of relationships. And it's estimated that people might have to try to leave a relationship like this 7 or even more times before they're actually able to leave a relationship like this. And trauma bonds are things that are activated in our adult life, the origins of which usually are based in trauma from childhood. And when you look at an adult relationship that is described as a trauma bond, there's often a narcissistic abuse dynamic in it where a person is idealized and then devalued and then discarded. But these trauma bonds happen in lots of different types of dysfunctional relationships. And like I say, many times the origin is in childhood trauma. And what happens is a child starts to become conditioned to traumatically bond to an abusive or a negligent or a narcissistic parent. And then when they become adults, they are conditioned also to bond with the same type of person in adult life. Some of the reasons that a child might be conditioned this way is when they grow up and they don't experience and are never taught unconditional love, where their parents don't attach to them by letting them feel safe and protected, encouraging them to become the best version of themselves that they can possibly be, soothing them when they're in distress, and working to meet their needs. In this type of childhood trauma, acceptance from the parents is generally based on performance, how you're doing and how you're making me look. Often it's based in extreme perfectionism and conforming to the rules within the family, often dysfunctional rules in a family. Any kind of validation for the child comes from people-pleasing or falling in line or doing whatever it is either the narcissistic parent wants or just not rocking the boat. Enabling. This type of dynamic happens in alcoholic families or families where parents have severe mental illness as well. And often these patterns are intergenerational. They go from one generation to the next to the next. What happens is the child starts to grow vulnerable and also predisposed to traumatic bonding in adult relationships. And there are 4 categories that really contribute to this. And these are conditions of worth, denial of reality, chronic criticism and invalidation, and betrayal. And I'll kind of go through each of those. When we talk about conditions of worth, this is where a child's basic needs are sort of exchanged for proving yourself worthy. In other words, the parent doesn't look at that child as innately worthy and may not be naturally attuned to understanding what the child needs and wanting to meet those needs, but you have to prove that you're worthy. You have to earn love. You have to live up to another person's expectations to prove your worth. And part of the game is that you're actually never good enough. You're never worthy. So you feel like you constantly have to prove yourself. You can see how this turns into dysfunction in adult relationships. Denying the child's reality. This is when parents, caregivers, when they rationalize the abuse or they rationalize neglect, they blame it on other people. Maybe they blame it on the child. They deny their reality and deny that their feelings are valid. They will gaslight. They'll ask a child, "Why are you so angry? Why are you so upset? Nothing happened. I didn't do that. That didn't happen. Why are you so XYZ, fill in the blanks?" In other words, your emotions don't make sense. Children learn to mistrust themselves and their judgment and their own intuition. And this can lead to repeating relationship after relationship where again you feel unheard, you are unseen, and it somehow feels familiar. In an adult relationship, it kind of feels like love because that's what love felt like growing up. Chronic criticism and invalidation. This is when your basic needs are ignored, neglected, your feelings are invalidated, where you're told that your feelings don't make sense. And constant criticism, never getting it right, never doing it right, becomes something that the child starts to expect from people in relationships. With the constant criticism and chronic invalidation, often children are shamed for having their feelings. They're shamed for having anger. They're shamed for being sad or for having an opinion, for having needs. And those needs are the most simple and the most basic: to feel safe, to feel wanted, and to feel loved. Sadly, this can all lead to neglecting oneself, to sabotaging oneself, can lead to numbing behaviors and falling into relationships as an adult with partners who reinforce those feelings of unworthiness. When children are neglected, abused, and then the perpetrators never recognize that it's wrong, they never apologize, they never try to make it better, they never try to get help for themselves. This is betrayal. This is the way that children are betrayed by the dysfunctional system that they were born into. And the child begins to feel more and more unwanted and unlovable. And toxic shame is internalized in that child, who grows up to become an adult with internalized toxic shame. It can show up as betrayal of themselves, attraction to partners who represent an abusive, neglectful parent, and reinforce those beliefs in oneself about not being good enough. If these are patterns that you see in yourself or in a loved one, take time to look at the origins of some of these patterns and how they might have actually grown out of dysfunction in childhood. Because there are pathways forward out of these types of repeated patterns. There is healing and people can move forward. Insight and awareness are crucial. And though they're necessary, they're not sufficient. Because you have to start to recognize how those patterns were reinforced through things like intermittent reinforcement, positive and negative reinforcement, and how it strengthened the addictive nature of those toxic relationships. You need to learn how to love and accept yourself and practice compassion for yourself. And do a lot of the healing work that often comes down to trauma work. Trauma work like somatic experiencing or EMDR, trauma-focused CBT. And sadly, when we look at some of the very difficult personality disorders that people deal with, where their emotion dysregulation negatively impacts people around them, we realize that even, for instance, up to 90% of people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder have unresolved trauma from their childhood in their own background. You can see how these cycles repeat themselves. Like the old meme says, that hurt people hurt people. So it is important that we're able to look at what healing might look like and growing out of these abusive relationship patterns that often repeat themselves throughout the generations. Healing is possible, and it's a process and a journey. It doesn't happen overnight, but absolutely it's worth it when you come out on the other side and you regain your sense of yourself, when you regain your self-esteem and your self-respect, and you know how to have healthy boundaries with people. If the videos are helpful, I encourage you to like, subscribe, sign up for notifications so we can let you know when more material is coming out. And feel free to enter some comments and start a conversation. Let me know what you're interested in hearing about. And until the next time, take care of yourself, take care of one another. Bye-bye.